You know what's really crazy is just 9 months ago, this building used to be my old garage, and since then we've accomplished so much, including starting up so many new aquariums. And it kind of inspired me to show you guys 8 different ways you can start up your aquarium. Now, when I say start up your own aquarium, what I really mean is how to get it cycled in order to be able to support life, like your plants as well as your fish, and making it safe conditions so they clearly don't die. Anything organic in your aquarium, wood, plants, the fish, everything in there is creating waste. Ammonia. Ammonia is deadly and we know it. Too much of it, or even just a little amount of it, can potentially kill off your fish. Now, we know one thing. We all hear about this good bacteria, and that's true. But this good bacteria exists everywhere, just not in numbers able to support life like in an aquarium. So what we need to do is harbor as much of that good bacteria in our filtration systems and amongst all of the surfaces in our aquariums in numbers able to support the amount of waste that our aquariums are creating. To simplify the nitrogen cycle though, all of this waste we're talking about is creating ammonia. There's a bacteria called nitrosomonas that's going to oxidize that ammonia into something that's less deadly called nitrite. Nitrobacter oxidizes that nitrite into nitrate. Nitrate being entirely less deadly than the previous two. And nitrate we know is used by plants, for example. However, a lot of the times we measure nitrates in order to know when we're supposed to be doing our water changes, but a lot of the times that's not a good indicator as to when you should do your water changes, as opposed to how many dissolved organics are in your water column. But that's not really the topic of today's video. All we want to do right now is how can we get as much of this bacteria into our aquariums in numbers that are going to be able to support the life within it. So like I said, these bacteria exist everywhere, simply just not in numbers able to support life. So why can't we just set up an aquarium and wait until there's enough bacteria in it in order to add fish? And that's actually one of the methods of starting up a new aquarium. Is called the fishless cycle. Basically, we set up a new aquarium and cross our fingers for the next 6 weeks and hope that bacteria established within the aquarium in numbers able to support the fish we're going to be adding. Now, regardless of the method that I'm going to be teaching you today, you want to start off with adding your fish in slowly. We're not taking a bunch of fish and adding them in all at once, or you're going to have a bacterial bloom and probably an ammonia spike. However, I will also show you how you can take a ton of fish and add them in all at once, but that's probably going to be due to the fact that you already have some other established aquariums. More on this in a moment. With all of these different types of cycles, we're monitoring the water closely. We're testing for ammonia, we're testing for nitrite, and we're testing for nitrate. With the fishless cycle though, this can be one of the most deceiving because all of these things don't appear in an aquarium that doesn't have any waste present. Of course, sometimes you might, but this is one of the worst ways you could cycle off your aquarium, is the fishless cycle. Only due to the fact that you might have a completely sterile environment, not enough bacteria is present, you waited your 6 weeks, you add in your fish, and everything starts dying. So, in my opinion, you should stay away from that method. But what if you use the fishless cycling method and simply add in bacteria in a bottle? And you guys know that there's so many companies out there that are advocating they have instant aquariums where you could just take this bacteria in a bottle, dump it into your aquarium, and within a day or two, you can fully stock your aquarium. In my opinion, that's a bit iffy as well. There's so much reports out there that, you know, a lot of these bacteria in a bottles don't work. In my opinion, they kind of do, but it's not something I solely depend on ever. And it actually takes a while for your fish to actually produce enough waste to get to that bacteria for it to consume. So, should you depend on that? Well, you can add bacteria in a bottle along with other methods, but in my opinion, the fishless cycle or just adding bacteria in the bottle is not something I do. I always got to add in these disclaimers. Some of these methods will work for others. I'm just explaining to you guys what has worked for me. Just because they're always out until I start shining the lights on them and sitting in front of them, of course. You know, when it comes to this bacteria in a bottle, you still want to monitor your parameters the same as any other aquarium. We're looking for ammonia, we're looking for nitrite, we're looking for nitrate. We want to make sure there's no ammonia, we want to make sure there's no nitrite, and there's only a reading of nitrate. And this can potentially take up to 6 weeks. During this time, you don't want to fully stock your aquarium, or you're going to end up with a bunch of dead floating fish, most likely. All right, so the fishless cycle isn't that great. What if we just add in fish right away? Well, that's a method as well. It's called the feeder fish cycle, or, insignificant fish cycle. And in my opinion, this is the cruelest method of cycling an aquarium. I highly suggest against it, but it works. I mean, when you add in a few tiny little comets or goldfish into the aquarium, these guys are producing ammonia in the aquarium, and over the course of 6 weeks, you're going to cycle your tank. The bacteria are going to have a food source. They're going to populate your filtration, your substrate, and so forth in numbers, able to support that many fish that are in the aquarium. All during this time, though, your goldfish or feeder fish have to survive this ammonia cycle, which in my opinion is cruel. And again, it's not something I have done, but if you want to use organic materials, the next method is definitely your choice. In the previous method, we talked about adding fish to produce waste in the aquarium to feed the bacteria that we need to cultivate. All we're really doing is kind of just adding in something that's going to produce waste into the tank. So why not take a piece of raw shrimp, drop that into the aquarium, and let that produce the waste and the ammonia. As it decomposes and rots and the bacteria attack it, it's going to produce lots of ammonia in the aquarium, and the bacteria will have a food source and have the ability to populate your aquarium. So instead of using feeder fish, which in my opinion is cruel, just drop in some organic matter like that into the tank and let that do the exact same job. At the same time, maybe you take that bacteria in a bottle, dump that into the tank with its new food source of a shrimp or two, and over the course of a week or so, monitor ammonia levels and see if that bacteria in a bottle is actually working for you. This is a much faster, much safer method, and of course it's not that cruel. Now we're getting into the ways that I cycle aquariums. So with adding that shrimp into your aquarium, all we're kind of looking to do is create ammonia within the aquarium, and the answer is kind of yes. So why can't we just add ammonia directly to the fish tank? And the answer to that is also yes. But this is one of the most dangerous and deadly methods of cycling an aquarium, simply because most people overdose. We could take some household cleaner ammonia. This is old country. It's widely reputable in the hobby to be fish safe. I've used it a ton of times. I do not use this to cycle aquariums. I use this to actually keep filtration systems alive when I shut down tanks. I'll explain that in a minute. But when it comes to selecting ammonia, not everybody's going to have access to the same brand. What we're looking to do is shake it up. Once we shake it up and open it, we're looking to see if there's any foaming at the top. A few bubbles is normal, but if there is foaming, that means there's some other agents within the ammonia that we don't want. We just want ammonia and water, that's it. Now a capful per 100 gallons is typically what's been useful for me, but we're still going to have to monitor the nitrogen cycle with our test kits, looking for that ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. Of course, how much you're going to need to add and how often is going to vary depending on the size of your aquarium, but in my opinion, a capful every 2 weeks should be sufficient. You should only have to do this twice. If you add a capful of this ammonia into one of my tanks, I'd kill my fish. That's too much ammonia all at once. However, you can heavily cycle an aquarium depending on how much ammonia you use. In my opinion, you should take a bucket. You should add your filtration. Usually you'll have a canister filter or a hang on the back filter or even a sponge filter handy. You could put that in a bucket and you could cycle that right in there. We're cycling the filtration systems. We're not cycling the water. Again, bacteria needs a surface to live on. It's not a free swimming organism. Now, even though I would advise against using that method because simply put, most people overdose or don't dose enough, or it's just too touchy in my opinion. What I use it for is this. You guys know that I'm going to be rescaping the 2,000 gallon aquarium shortly, and for at least 2 to 3 days, I have to take the fish out in order to do so. These fish are going to be moved into another 100 gallon aquarium temporarily, which will be running another filtration system that I'm already cycling, or that's actually already cycled and ready to go. But in the meantime, what about the filtration system that's plumbed into the 2,000? Well, for the fluidized filter, I'm going to be able to add a cap full of this to feed the bacteria and keep it alive. For the canister filtration below, I'll be able to run this in recirculation mode, which means that it's just circulating the water within it. I'll pop the cap off and I will add a capful, and that should keep this alive as well. In fact, I probably wouldn't even have to do a capful for each, maybe like a half a cap or something like that. I'll do some calculations and I'll go from there. But this is why I have ammonia, is to keep filtrations alive in times like this. Because if I shut these filtration systems down, bacteria starts to die right away. You have around 24 hours to kind of recover from a power outage like that, or your filtration systems being without a food source. But you know, after that, the die-off is extreme. And that last method is how I cycle an aquarium with a piece of raw shrimp, bacteria in a bottle if you want to grab it, and I'd cycle it naturally that way. Of course, once again, we're monitoring levels the entire time. We're looking for the spikes in ammonia that's going to happen, but that's eventually going to come down. Nitrate starts to build up, but then that starts to come down, and then of course nitrate at the end of the cycle, and then you should only see nitrate moving forward, and at that point, that's when you can stock safely your aquarium. However, I have a ton of fish tanks here, which means I have a ton of cycled aquariums and a ton of cycled media. Now, media is the material we put in our filtration system that allows the bacteria to grow on. Now, I've shown you guys this method many times before, but let's take another look. This is part of the filtration system to the 2,000-gallon aquarium. It's a fluidized filter, and this media here is a fluidized media. We're not really going to get into the methods of filtration. I've done that so many times in the past. However, what I want to point out here is what's on the bottom. This is a ton of ceramic media that is cycled at the bottom. At any given point, I can grab a bunch of this and toss it into a new filter. Of course, we still have more filtration here. However, I just want to point out the fact that I always have additional media running within my aquariums. Right, of course, everybody's got a 100-gallon fluidized filtration system. Of course you don't, but what I'm talking about is perhaps instead of just relying on the filtration that you have, you take a pantyhose and you cut the leg off and you fill it with additional media and you hide it in your aquarium somewhere so that at some point when you need a hospital tank or a quarantine tank or whatever the case might be, or you just want to set up a new tank rather quickly, you have established media already. That still doesn't mean you can go ahead and pile a ton of fish into your aquariums, but this is exactly what I do in order to be able to stock them right away, is have all of that media already established. It's not going to be enough bacteria in numbers and able to support whatever life I throw at it, but it's putting me off to a great start, and I don't really have to worry about the nitrogen cycle and that 6-week waiting period. I can start stocking right away and have no fish deaths. I do a number of things in order to stock 50, 60 fish at once, and we're going to get to that at the end. However, what if you don't have, or what if you don't want to have a bag of media sitting in your aquarium, or have the money to have additional media just cycling wherever when you never know if you might not use it or not? Well, one thing most of you have is substrate. You see, the bacteria within our aquariums are not free floating. They need to live on a surface. They live on your decorations and they live on your substrate. Now, your substrate has a ridiculous amount of surface area. So if you don't have cycled media, go ahead and take a couple scoops of substrate from a heavily established aquarium, toss that into a pantyhose or some sort of a mesh bag, and throw that into your filtration system, and it's essentially the same thing as having cycled media on hand. So that was 7 ways of starting up your aquariums. The last one is actually one of the oldest methods, and I know a lot of you guys have heard about the word mulm, M-U-L-M. This is basically detritus, uneaten food, bacteria, all kinds of gunk that collects in your filter. Let me show you what I mean. You're gonna have to come over here to see this. Now, what I'm about to show you guys, I call liquid gold. The next time you're doing a water change, or the next time you're doing maintenance on your filtration system, or if you're starting up a new aquarium and you have a friend that has an established aquarium, tell them, hey, next time you're cleaning out your filters, can I have the disgusting mess it creates? Step 1, get some aquarium water. You don't want to have water from your tap or anything that has chlorine in it or chloramines. You also kind of want it to be the same temperature, because at the end of the day, bacteria is also an organism that can die from conditions like that. Now, we all have canister filters, hang on the back filters, all different types of filtration that has some sort of a pre-filter, the stuff that polishes the water, whether it's a sponge or some form of polyfilter, or whatever the case might be. We all have something, and in my case, I've got some sponges here that could use a bit of a scrub. So what I'm gonna do here is take this and kind of rinse it off in this bucket here, squeezing it. I'm not going to run this under hot water. I never clean my sponges in fresh water. I always clean them in tank water because this is also covered in bacteria. But what I'm trying to do here is get off, and this isn't all that bad actually, but what I'm looking to do is to rinse off some of the bacteria, some of the detritus, uneaten foods, and so forth. And what's happening in this little concoction now is there's a bunch of bacteria with lots of food source. What we're gonna do with this is, you guessed it, we're gonna dump this into our aquariums. Now, of course, I know what you're thinking. I don't wanna dump this into my tank. It's gonna make it all cloudy and gross. Of course it is. Give it a few days and it'll be fine though. Personally, I prefer to dump it into my filtration system because that is my life support system. That's where I want the majority of my bacteria to establish and be present in the highest numbers. Even still, we're still gonna need to monitor water parameters, but at this point, we can still slowly start to add fish. So of course you could pick and choose what works best for you and what you have access to with all of these materials that I've shown you. However, the most important thing is to stock your aquariums extremely slowly. It's not a race. Aquariums, a nice aquarium could take months in order to establish, but if you're like me and you want your aquariums to be established almost immediately, I start off with already cycled media. And what I mean by already cycled media is I have enough biological media to fully stock my filtration system. So it's like I'm taking it off one aquarium and putting it on another, and I just did 100% water change. I'll also take mulm, what I've just shown you, and add that to the aquarium system so the bacteria and all of that detritus can establish throughout the aquarium itself. Then I can essentially fully stock the aquarium as long as I monitor the water parameters closely, as well as the fish's activity, and do my water changes. So of course, this is only 8 methods that you could use to start your new aquarium or establish one and add it to your collection. However, there's multiple other ways you could do so, and I know many people, what I actually want to hear is, how did you start your first aquarium? How did you cycle it? Did you know anything? I know the presence of the internet and YouTube and so many informational sources are available now, but back when I got in the hobby, it was kind of like you're on your own. So I had a big learning curve, to say the least. So I kind of wanted to bring this to focus and do these types of videos here and there. I do want to do some things that are some beginner type videos. Perhaps we'll dive into the nitrogen cycle and I'll talk about bacteria, and because at the end of the day, bacteria is your most important organism in your aquarium. I also want to talk about their preferred conditions. You know, I just kind of want to dive back into making more of you a successful hobbyist by potentially emulating or at least getting some ideas on how I'm successful with my hobby. Anyways, if you have any questions or comments, or you want to share how you started your first aquarium, let me know in the comments section below. I'm not here to make fun. I don't think anybody else is here, but your story could potentially save somebody else's fish. Full disclosure, I'm still sick. That's why I sound like this. I got a pounding headache, not thinking clearly, and I kind of just winged this video, but I've been wanting to do it for quite a while now, so I figured, hey, how about Tuesday afternoon when this video needs to be out in an hour? So if I missed any information, or you want me to do something like this again with a clear head, please let me know in the comment section below.